Hi guys, I'm Shmee, hello and welcome back to the channel where you join me today for an outing with my Supra. Of course, I have now owned the new Toyota GR Supra for about 6 months or so in total. I've driven it about 3,500 to 4,000 miles, which I know isn't loads, but of course this is the quite rare A90 edition. Now today I'd like to have a bit of an update, tell you about some of the things I've experienced, some of the small things which I would say are almost little niggles about the new 5th generation Supra, but also a small little modification we need to make. In fact, this car, quite unusually, is pretty much bone stock. There's only been one small change to date, which is the position of the front number plate. Today we will do something else to the inside, you'll see what that's about in just a moment, as well as answering one of the biggest questions. Why, given it's a rare collector's car, do I not have PPF on it? I will explain all in just a moment. We'll take it out as well for a drive. So let's talk today then about the GR Supra. Let's get straight onto that last point first actually. Why have I not installed paint protection film onto the Supra, especially given this is a pretty rare version of the Supra, and I normally do with the Shmeemobiles when I take delivery of them, fit PPF to make sure that they don't get any stone chips or anything like that along the way. Now I know a lot of you will know already about this, but as a quick reminder, this car is one of what they called the A90 editions. Of course, the code name for the 5th generation Toyota Supra, the project between BMW and Toyota, is the A90. In this case, there are literally only 90 of these in total across Europe of the launch editions, and out of all of those, only 24 of them are right-hand drive UK cars. So this is a 1 of 90 or a 1 of 24, depending how you want to look at it. It is a bit of a collector's car, even though I've been driving and doing some miles with it. I don't intend to garage queen it entirely, but with that, you did get this exclusive satin storm grey paintwork. Now the reason it does not have PPF is purely because in the guidebook, the user manual inside the car, it expressly states that installing PPF could cause defects in the paint and will void your paint warranty. Now that means if you want the car to be correct, you shouldn't install PPF on it, which is quite an unusual quirk. Sometimes you can on satin paintwork, but in the case of this, it says no, and that is basically why I have not done it, in case there are any issues down the line. Now, like I said, this car is basically stock. I didn't really want to modify it, and in the YouTube world, having a stock Supra is actually quite unusual. I did think at the start I might go crazy, but then I started to appreciate what it means to have this A90 edition, which you will see also when I talk about the inside in a moment. So of course, the only thing we really changed was getting a new bracket here for the number plate, the license plate at the front, where it would normally sit with some screws drilled through the front bumper over the front of the nose, completely taking away some of the lines. It is much better there and is vertical, flat facing forwards, which is exactly how it has to be legally at the front, full-size lettering and everything like that. So a legal solution that looks, I would say, better. And a few people have asked actually, what about the airflow? Doesn't this kind of interrupt being over a vent like this? Well, it's actually a closed vent. I'm not sure if you can see this, but this isn't open. This is closed. Only the bit below here is open, so it doesn't actually affect because the airflow can still go underneath. The main cooling at the front is actually right through the middle, and in fact, you can see on this side, because this has the adaptive sensor, I think, behind it, but only the bottom sections are actually open to begin with. So it's not a full usable vent at the front as you'd expect. In fact, the car has quite a few of these on my dislikes list, these fake vents that you have all around it, although you can get those opened up. Certain people have already done so, and they do look pretty cool when you do. If I show you though what we're going to be doing today, one other thing about the car, there were US launch editions as well. The North American market had 1,500 of them, and they actually came with plaques here on the dashboard, which we never got over here in Europe, that would just go on these panels. But what we do have now that they have sent out are these to finally install, which he says a little bit awkward to do this one-handed, but the A90 edition, 1 of 90 cars with the signature there of Akio Toyota to install. Bit of a story behind those, it's quite funny actually. Originally, they said that they would come, of course, after the cars were delivered. They weren't actually fully ready, they didn't have guidebooks and things, but managed to take delivery of it and enjoy the ownership at the start. Some of these came, but they were suitable for a left-hand drive car, not a right. So we had to wait for the second set to get made and to be delivered, and it's taken me a bit of time to get around to actually installing them, but that's the plan now, to add those to the dash to match in with some of the other unique aspects of the interior of the A90, which you might remember had to have the red steering wheel and red side panels on the door and the central console for the driver's section, and being black over on the passenger side. So I'm going to crack on with that and get those fitted. I guess that I'm basically only going to have one hit at actually getting this right. It goes in very easily, and hopefully even I can manage to get this completely correct. So let's just make sure there's no dust underneath there. Peel this back. This is not exactly the world's biggest modification, but it's about all I can bring you guys at this time. So let's try and work out how to carefully align this. This isn't as easy as actually I hoped it might be. Is that in? Is that in? That feels pretty good. Press it down. Done. Okay. One down. Let's get the second one. I'm sorry, this is a bit random, isn't it? Actually, let's give the bottom half a wipe, which is actually quite curved, which makes it slightly more difficult. But we can try this. Hopefully, even I, like I said, I'm going to be able to get this in correctly. This is actually a lot more fiddly. And there we go. That's it. Yes, that's correct. Perfect. Okay, I was a little bit worried there. I was being slightly awkward about it. So that's in. Lights have gone on for me. There we go, back on. Is this all looking good? Let's have a quick look. Let's show you guys how this has turned out. There we go. That has come out very, very well. A nice little touch, I think, for the 1 of 90 A90 edition. Would have been great to have that from new, but to be honest, I'm not complaining at all. It's lovely to have it now as part of that passenger side of the dashboard. With that all sorted, let me come around to the driver's side. And I'm sorry, it is quite noisy here with the extractor fan that we have right behind. And this car is the smallest car that I currently own, hence why it's parked in my smallest space. Previously, we've had the Schmini and some other very small cars here, but even this, it's a little bit of a problem to actually climb in. In fact, sometimes it's easier to climb through. What you can do though, with the key, of course, is you can hold the unlock button, which does put down the windows, which at least makes life a very small touch easier to actually do so. So in fact, if I just come through, it's a bit bright with the torch on right now, and try and work out how to do this, you can see that that's not the easiest. I wonder if with the SLS I could probably open the doors in this gap. Anyway, let's climb on in here, if I can do so carefully. Oh, there we go. Try and get my foot in. Yes, and that is one of the things that is awkward about the Supra, how low this roof line is. It makes it very difficult to get your head underneath. It's an odd thing. So what do we have? 3,714 miles on the dashboard, but let's start it up. And that's one thing I might change. I might put a different exhaust on it. Anyway, for the time being, let's head on out. I'll tell you some more things about the driving experience here on board the Toyota GR Supra. As I mentioned the last time that I took this car out, when you're driving it in London, the beauty of it is how small it is, and it makes such a big difference. If I've been driving in, say, the G63 and I get into the Supra, it is minuscule on the road. One thing though that the more I drive it, I'm finding even more peculiar is the steering. The steering wheel itself is really quite narrow. It doesn't have that kind of chunky sports car feel, which makes it a strange one for me to drive and kind of just feel in general. But also the automatic lane guidance, which I like to keep on, because if a car has a safety system, I think you should generally use it. If you've got that available, you should have it on. But this car, when it detects you going or moving across a lane or something, it just snaps the steering wheel. And that can actually, in like construction zones where you have lines on the road that go in different ways or painted in different colours, can actually be a little bit dangerous. The way that the lane guidance is so hypersensitive. Anyway, that's just, I guess, a small quirk of the experience of driving it. As I mentioned, you do have this very, very low roof line beside you, which you're super aware of as well. Even when you're actually driving in the car, it's kind of there. And I'm trying to be nitpicky here. I'm trying to pick at the things about the new Supra which I guess aren't the best overall. I mean, in general terms, what you get for the money is a great car to drive. It's a really, really usable, enjoyable car, a very fun car, a very all-round car, a very practical car. There's a decent amount of luggage space in the back behind us. It's very nicely finished, even more so now thanks to having this new dashboard trim, which you can see out in the daylight, which actually is really smart looking across at it. And generally, you know, it's well equipped in terms of technology. It has all the adaptive cruise control if you want to follow the car in front. It has a nice digital dashboard display in front of me. It has blind spot monitoring. You can see the orange light on the door mirrors. Speed recognition, so it reads the signs on the road and tells you obviously the speed limit. Not that most people seem to care about that at all right now, and it's just an easy, you know, enjoyable driving experience, which makes it a really, really good car, it has to be said, especially even just now heading out to the shops. And yeah, you know, that's pretty much what it is, just a few oddities to do with the steering. that's where I'm at. One big mission successful, and what I was telling you about the practicality of the Supra. Come and have a look at quite how much stuff you can actually fit into what is actually quite a small car. So back here, press and hold, pops open the boot. There is no button to open the boot, which is slightly irritating. You do have to use the button on the key or the button just on the driver's door. But inside here, we have a whole lot of shopping. You can fit a decent amount. You can take out the parcel shelf as well, and it does go all the way like straight through towards the driver section of the cabin. So you can squeeze things in, you can get them all underneath the sides and do a whole shop. Anyway, we will now jump back on board to take the car back home. But as you can see, yeah, just kind of an easy car to use and an enjoyable one here in London. And a nice afternoon actually. Anyway, back onwards. When you're sitting in the car, one thing that you notice is, because it has these incredibly wide rear arches, when you're looking out the door mirror, they just kind of stick out, and it actually makes it a little bit awkward to park this car straight. Now this is a really pernickety thing, but I love cars to be parked very, very neatly, and I always notice that in this car, I'm always a tiny bit out, which is just a strange little thing. Anyway, it's a lovely evening. I think you have to be going a bit faster. I wanted to think if I could demonstrate the lane thing that I was talking about earlier, but when you drift towards the lane, it just snatches the steering wheel and pulls it back. But alas, we're obviously in the city roads at 40-mile-an-hour speed limit here. But anyway, short little drive back from the supermarket back towards home, where we will get things unloaded and wrap things up. I've emptied out the car and taken everything inside, but I realised that up to this point I've actually been quite negative about the Supra, which isn't really what I intended. Of course, I very much enjoyed the ownership up to this point. This is just more of an update on some of the things that I've learned as I've driven it more miles, spent more time behind the wheel and become more familiar with the car in comparison with some of my earlier videos when I had only just collected it, because the car hasn't really had an update in quite a while. I'll tell you a few things that are much more positive. It is a very easy car to drive. I've mentioned that a few times. Because it's tiny, and especially here in London, it is a doddle in our tiny streets with tiny parking spaces. This kind of car is perfect for that kind of thing, and when you combine it with being quite practical for such a small, in terms of its footprint, two-seat sports car, it's also decent to just use for most purposes as well. And also, when you do take it on a longer run, let's say a gentle drive on the motorway, it is also very efficient too, and if that lane assistance gets annoying, you can just turn it off as well. Another feature that I really like about the car are the headlights. Now, to just take the key out of my pocket, which is a very BMW-esque key, it has to be said, but unlock it so that the headlights illuminate, the running lights at least. They have those almost vertical bars at the side, which makes the car look very wide, and then they have the swoops that come underneath towards the very nose cone of the car, and I think they're just a pretty cool look, very distinctly recognisable as a Supra. When you see one coming towards you at night, you can tell it instantly. It's not quite as sharp in terms of the nose design as the FT1 concept when it was originally shown, but it is still, I guess, a bit of that design integrated, and of course it has to be based around the proportions of its sister car, the BMW Z4 underneath. And talking about that, let's come through and show you something quite odd about this. And I'm going to turn on the light quickly. This is one of the quirks of this car, the fuel filler cap. This is huge. It's a massive, massive thing. When you open it up, the fuel filler nozzle is there, off to the kind of side. You'd think, why don't they just have one that's much smaller? Well, clearly that's dictated by the underpinnings, what's going on behind the scenes with these much more inflated arches than its sister car has. But it has to have that extra size, because when you're holding the fuel filler nozzle here, the handle is obviously down there. So it had to be much larger to make sure that you could actually fill it without having to kind of go upside down or do something weird with it, which is just, I guess, an oddity of the car, but something I picked up on over time with it in general. I'll tell you what, just to come around very quickly to this side as well, I'm very happy now that it has those inserts on the dashboard, and I'm also very relieved that I did them nicely, that I managed to fit them quite well. They're fitted completely correctly as they should be. So I guess that's been a bit of an update with this car, an answer as to why it doesn't have paint protection film, an outing, a small modification. I don't count that really as a modification, sticking the dashboard things and the number plates. But I think in terms of modifications, I'm not going to do anything permanent. This car is never going to get a wide body. It's too special in the paintwork as an A90 edition. There's also a signed letter with the VIN number from Akio Toyota as well, and a whole series of things that go with it. It's just been a really special purchasing experience to get the car. I might do something like change the exhaust system, because because that's fairly easy to do, obviously without being permanent, because it would be nicer to have a little bit more of a rasp out of it, but nothing dramatic. I'm not going to risk the engine. I mean, it has plenty of power. I'd love to have actually put it on a dyno, and hopefully at some point in the future I might be able to do that, to pop it on a dyno and see what power it actually does make from stock. Because when I took it for a run on the German autobahns, you might remember I took it for a VMAX run to go find where the limiter of it was when it was clear to do so, and it felt pretty quick. It feels really, really pretty quick, this car. Anyway, I still enjoy it a lot. I don't see selling it anytime soon. I pretty much use it. I use it as kind of my daily driver off camera, if that makes sense. It's the car that I take to places when I'm just hopping in and going somewhere, a short drive or even a longer drive, or just going somewhere where I want a car that's functional and works well, does the job, and I don't want, you know, the full brutality of the G63 or the crazy experience of a supercar. I just take this. I love it. It's a really good car to just actually drive, which is, I guess, why it's clocking up some miles for a collector edition. Anyway, I think that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I appreciate your support as always. That's it for this time though, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.